Well,
Mm.
huge welcome from sunny Zurich to all of our loyal listeners. I'm here at the moment on a little trip. Had the joys of the FIFA Museum yesterday, just on the cusp of the World Cup. So it was great to see some very fond memories from my ancestors of 1966 World Cup, and it went into a bit of detail of how we won it, the magical game against Argentina in the quarters, the semi against Portugal, and then the great final against Germany. So that was very good to go back into the archives as we kick into the World Cup. Again, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Ryan Stevenson. Ryan, has your week been as exciting as mine, going around
Well,
Switzerland?
well, absolutely not. I've been working this week, but interesting on the comment about your ancestors. Do you have a relation in the England World Cup winning team?
I wish, but vicariously I live through them, as you do, I'm sure.
But no, but yeah, really excited for this tournament. It's already obviously kicked off. We were having a discussion, weren't we, about memories of bygone years and World Cups, and I was having to think last night that when you're a kid, you always feel the World Cup really exciting, and I think when you get older, you realize, well, this only comes every 4 years, and there's only so many more I'm going to actually see in my lifetime. So I think for me, this one's quite exciting for that reason. You sort of realize in your 30s that this is actually quite an exciting thing, and the way it's shaping up this year I think makes it for a very interesting one, hence why we've launched this podcast.
Agreed. It's good. We've deliberately, some would say, waited to see a couple of the games so that we can get a bit of a flavour of the World Cup. So all the hosts have now been in action. For me, the standouts are clearly America. They had a great performance against, a tricky South American unit in Paraguay last night. So it's good. It's always good to see the hosts do well. Obviously, Mexico turned up too. So, yeah, it's just a nice entree for the tournament. Have you caught much of the action so far, Brian?
Yeah, I've watched most of the games, even the Bosnia game last night. And we said it in episode one. A lot of teams are going to sort of set up defensively, try and nab a goal, and then hold it, and that's what Bosnia tried to do. But of course, the host Canada managed to get a goal. Um, but yeah, as a start, I think some good performances from the host nations, particularly as you mentioned, USA, former gunner Balogun scoring there as well, just to note. So good to see the Arsenal players or ex-Arsenal players doing well in the World Cup. Hopefully, the England contingent follow that pattern. Um, but yeah, some good performances all around, I think. But again, some more interesting pictures coming up. I think with USA and Paraguay, you would have expected USA to have won. The Mexico tie, South Africa were quite disappointing, really. And I suppose the big talking point was the three red cards. And usually, if you said, "Wow, there's three red cards in a game," you'd say it was quite a violent game. It wasn't at all. It was just
I
the
agree.
way it felt.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think today it really kicks off in earnest as well. So obviously for me in Switzerland, I'll be able to watch that game live in a bar, which would be quite a unique experience with the locals. And obviously Brazil later in the evening, and then our sort of rivals, so to speak, Scotland kicking off against Haiti. So McTominay is apparently fit now to play as well, which is a big boost for them. McGinn's on form, so I'm actually quite excited to see how the old enemy do, as it were, in the group ahead.
Which probably leads us nicely onto the focus of this episode, where we're going to go through the groups, have a bit of debate as to who we think will be coming out on top and qualifying through, and just work our way all the way to the final, where we'll reveal both of our favorites and predictions along the way. So, Matt, maybe we can start with, and we have the advantage, of course, of seeing some of the games already in Group A. I think out of a lot of them, this one probably won't be too surprising. So I'll hand over to you to kick off your predictions there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we've had a bit of a spoiler, haven't we? And actually, both of us have kind of done the bracket, but I think it'll almost finish how it started. So Mexico are the clear favourites in this group. I see them coming first. South Korea are a decent unit. They've still, although in aging, Son, they've still got a quality player up front and a bit of firepower in behind him as well. I don't think the Czech Republic have got that much, but I do see them keeping South Africa at bay in their match. So I see it falling like that, really. I think South Africa my honest opinion is South Africa are a fairly weak unit that are only here because of the expanded format. Sorry, so I think it will be sequentially. And I think Czech have probably just got enough to squeak through on the best placed third team. That's how I see it, Ryan. How about you?
Yeah, I'm in agreement, really. I mean, maybe the Mexico-Korea game could be quite juicy. Korea, as you mentioned, well set up. They're always workhorses, aren't they? Getting around the field. So that could be quite a tasty fixture as to who gets top. But I'd agree Mexico and Korea are the ones that will go through as one and two, and Czech Republic probably doing enough, particularly against a weak South Africa type team, to get the goals and points to just get through in the third place qualifier. Um, so that was quite boring, wasn't it? We had an agreement. So let's move swiftly on to Group B.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit remiss for us to agree because it's quite a rare feat. So that really must be a sort of dour group, to be honest. And Group B, unfortunately, to our listeners, maybe just we'll time stamp some of these. Maybe just skip this bit. We'll probably be in agreement again, I imagine. So I've got Switzerland, my current home team, to win this group quite comfortably. I think Switzerland could probably win all of their games. Actually, and Switzerland are an interesting unit just to touch on, given I am here. They always seem to have these players that come out of hibernation every 4 years or every 2 years and have a good tournament. That Brill and Bomos that no one ever hears about, or Ricardo Rodriguez, these sort of players just come out of the ether. And they've got the likes of Kanji, they've got the likes of Xhaka. I think they've got a pretty Kobel and they've got a pretty solid core. So Switzerland are how I always see them. They're tricky to beat, but when they come across a good team, they typically do go out. So I think Switzerland will win this group comfortably, and then probably Canada just second before Bosnia. And I can't see Qatar adding much to this group. Hopefully they'll score a goal or so or get a draw, but that's how I see it. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, it's true about Switzerland. They always tend to beat the teams that they should be beating, and then as soon as they come up against one of the big guns, that's their tournament over. But they have done well historically. They've reached quarterfinals in the past, certainly the Euros. Whether they can do that in the World Cup, remains to be seen. But pretty much exactly the same as you. I know I put my predictions prior to watching the games last night and actually had Qatar in third, but I think Bosnia probably have the edge over them. Like I said, they've already got a point on the board, pretty well structured defensively. They're all built like power lifters, aren't they, in the Bosnian team? Even the wingers, you'd expect at least to have some small, fast-paced wingers, but they're all bodybuilders. So yeah, again, probably not the most interesting group. Switzerland by far probably the favourites, and Canada getting through as well, which would be good for the home nations in terms of the hosts.
Indeed, and another ex-Arsenal player is captain of Bosnia as well. He's
There
just
we
sort of
go.
come out of the blue as well, hasn't he? So
Well, there's a
it's
theme,
good,
there's a
good to
theme
see.
here.
There is, there is. Group C, I think you've probably got a possibly controversial opinion on this. So why don't you kick off with your predictions?
Yeah, Group C, I think everyone will probably have Brazil coming out top, and then it's a case of splitting Scotland and Morocco. Unfortunately for Haiti, they'll do very well to get out of that group. Um, Morocco, deep, very strong outfit, of course. But I think, and listening to the likes of Ali McCoist, I think there's a lot of Scots that actually, on the inside, they're quietly confident, and it would be the first time they've come out of the World Cup group stage, and I've got them in second. I think that game, particularly against Morocco, is going to be one of the pick out games in the knockout stage in the group stages. Um, and again, they're probably relying on key players staying fit. Um, but again, with a bit of well structured organization, which the Scots I think do have, um, the players have played a lot together as a unit through obviously the qualifiers. I don't think their team has changed much. And then if you're relying on the likes of a McGinn and McTominay to sort of be the stars of that side, um, off the back of the team working very hard together, I could see them, getting through in second place. Again, it's going to be a difficult game against Morocco. Could they steal something against Brazil? Again, nab a draw, be very solid defensively, and that could be a possibility too. So that's certainly going to be an interesting match when it comes across.
Yeah, I actually personally I think Morocco will get something against Brazil today. I've just got a feeling it could be a one-all draw, and Brazil will be a slow starter in this tournament. I think it's a tricky group for Scotland. if you look at it, because Morocco, are they the African champions or are they not? I don't really want to go on into this on this podcast, but they're a very good unit. They've got a solid back line, decent wingers coming in as well. So I think Morocco are a good team. What I'm intrigued by is Scotland and how they will do. So imagine the aura farming of McTominay if he scores against Brazil and they get a result there. That would just be incredible. And something could happen. They will challenge Brazil, and I recall, and any Scot fans listening will recall '98 World Cup, the last one that Scotland qualified. They also played Brazil in what I think was the opener there for the whole tournament. So they'll be very excited to cross hairs, as it were, with Brazil again, see what they can get. But notwithstanding all of that, I do think Scotland have got enough to come for me third, but for you second, and qualify into the last 32, which will be, as English people, will be happy to see them go on a little run, but not too far, is my personal opinion on this.
And one thing we're forgetting, of course, is Donald Trump. His mother is Scottish, so maybe there's a bit of influence there from
Oh,
Trump
indeed.
when they're giving some favourable decisions, bribing the rest.
Let's
I can.
see. Let's see. Let's see through. Let's see with that. And then, so Group D is an interesting one on paper. That if we'd filmed this podcast a couple of days ago, I may have actually said Group D is probably the most, let's say, egalitarian group, and it's hard to split all of the teams. I mean, even Paraguay got through South American qualifying, which is always, in my opinion, the hardest qualifying format. And then, moreover, Australia they haven't got a strong team on paper, but the Socceroos do always seem to overachieve. And I recall vividly. They obviously made it to the knockouts in the last tournament, but pushed Argentina to the wire in the last 16 games. And so Australia, as we know, as Brits from a sporting perspective, have got something about them when it does come to competitive edge. And then America have just started on fire. So I think this will be a fascinating group. Clearly, I spoke in the last podcast about Turkey and how I fancy them to be dark horses or outsiders for a good run in this tournament. So for me, I would say Turkey to win the group, USA second, followed by, uh, I still actually say Paraguay for what it's worth, as that was my original shout over Australia as my four.
Yeah, I actually had USA top, and this was again before they played last night. So, yeah, again with the Americans, they're athletes, aren't they? And they get about the field. Got a good manager in Pochettino, exciting manager, um, and they could quite easily go quite far and deep into this tournament. I don't think any of the big nations would fancy a knockout tie against USA, particularly given that it's on home turf. Um, and then Turkey, exciting team, quite a young team, I think.
Mm.
You've even picked out a few of the young players as potentially being the stars or the young stars of the tournament. Um, I don't think Paraguay and Australia can do too much damage to Turkey and the Americans. So then it will be just a case of who gets the nod in that tie, Paraguay or Australia. It could go either way really, and whether they even have enough goals in them between them to get that third place spot, remains to be seen. So really, yeah, I think for the Americans, they couldn't have really asked for a better group.
Yeah, fair, fair. So, and Group E. So, this is, and I'd like to gather your thoughts on this. This is a very competitive group. In my opinion, it's probably the second hardest group of the tournament. You've got probably Curacao, sorry, but you've probably got Germany, Ivory Coast, and Ecuador battling it out. How do you see this group falling, Ryan?
Yeah, this is probably the most exciting one for me. I mentioned in the last episode that I think Ecuador are actually one of the dark horses. Don't think they'll win it, but I can definitely see them knocking out a big team or indeed topping this group. Defensively, very solid. They've got some key players in that team. A young winger in Paez who, came from the Barcelona academy. Um, and their all-time top goal scorer and veteran Valencia sort of able to nab a goal. So if they're very defensively structured, getting through the games and scoring when they need to, I've actually got them topping the group, which a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people would go straight to Germany. But looking at the German side, I think they'll obviously have enough to get through the group. but I just think it lacks in a lot of components, and then it's not the German team that we're used to coming into a big tournament. So I'm going Ecuador. I think sometimes you've got to throw in a bit of a wild call. It's easy just to pick the best teams to finish top. But on this occasion, I'm actually going Ecuador to come out on top, and Ivory Coast doing enough in third place to get through um, in the third place.
Yeah, I think it'd be the same three qualifiers here. I obviously fancy Germany. I'll go with the boring option here. However, notwithstanding that, I do think Ecuador are a good team. So you look at South American qualifying, they came second. They only conceded 5 goals at the back. You've got Pacho and Hincapié, so possibly one of the strongest 3 or 4 centre half partnerships actually in the tournament, I would say here. And I think they will go undefeated in this group phase. I think to be Germany 7 points. I think that they'll probably get 5, and then Ivory Coast possibly 4 as part of this. So I think their undoing will come against Ivory Coast. But a good team, like we said. Germany again, we touched on them briefly last time. They haven't got the sort of the favourites tag that other German teams have had historically. I think they're a changing team. They are a dynamic team. If Wirtz and Musiala are on fire, they look great. It's just that centre forward piece that we've touched on previously. That is Kai Havertz going to win you the World Cup? Is Nick Woldemader going to win you the World Cup? Probably not, to be honest. So sorry to any German listeners, but that does remain to be seen.
Group
Um,
F.
so on Group F. So I think this is a fairly competitive group actually, and I fondly remember I was in a bar in Osaka with a couple of Dutch friends of mine, and we're speaking to a few locals at the bar, a few Japanese locals, and we're hotly debating this initial game, Netherlands against Japan, and how it might fall. And Japan are a very decent side. They seem to play Netherlands in the World Cup quite a lot. The Japanese we're speaking to were saying, and they can do well on a good day. And I saw Endo unfortunately is injured, which possibly stymies the team a bit, as he does add a lot of stability to that midfield. Netherlands, we touched on previously, very good defensively. They haven't got that much going forward, but in this group, I think they can nullify Japan. Okay, Gyökeres will be a threat, and maybe Isaac it will be a threat, but I fancy Netherlands to outgun them with their defensive structure. So for me, I would say Netherlands first. Japan I've obviously got an affinity for after my trip there, so Japan will come second for me. Sweden, very fortunate to qualify, winning no games in the qualification stage, I believe, and then going through off the back of or the limited games in the qualification stage, sorry, and winning off the back of the UEFA Nations League placings, beating Poland. So I think Sweden shouldn't be there really in principle. So I put them third. Tunisia are a fairly weak team. Okay, they beat France in a dead rubber in the last World Cup, but they haven't really got much about them for me. So clear order here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got exactly the same. And like you say on Sweden, lucky to get through. But again, they always seem similar to Switzerland in some respect. They at the big tournament, they do seem to just do enough to get through the group stage. And if they do happen to play against a side that they're equal to or should be beating, they usually do until they get up against one of the big nations or the favorites. So I could see it going very similar to as described. But of course, and I think Gyökeres plays better in a Sweden shirt than he does in an Arsenal shirt, just the way they're set up. And we've seen from past World Cups that if you've got a striker that's just able to score and the team to see through games, then that can get you quite far. So it's quite a big tournament for him, I think. But again, I think Japan and Netherlands will be the standouts in that group. And then moving from Netherlands over to Group G, likewise for Belgium, in my opinion, they're not as strong as bygone years, but they've been quite disappointing as well in past tournaments. So maybe without that pressure of going into the tournament, that they can actually just see out the games they should win. And really, they should be on paper beating Iran, Egypt, and New Zealand. The Iranian team is probably going to give them the biggest test I can imagine. I've got them coming out in second. But again, the Iran Egypt game, that's going to be quite tasty. Can Mo Salah find some form? He's not had the best season, but I think he'll obviously be up for it. he's had a lot of time off, hasn't he? Because back end of the season he wasn't really playing. So he could really be a star of that group as well. But has he got the legs?
Yeah, I think Iran will come second in this group as well. You look at Taremi is a proven striker. He's scored in the World Cup before. He's scored a lot in Portugal. He's playing for Olympiacos now, still a good player. You've got the likes of Ali Reza Shahanbach, who had a spell at Brighton, didn't do as well, but did well in the Dutch league previously, is a good player. I think they have got enough just to outgun Egypt here, when you've got both their star players, Salah and Marmoush, coming off pretty poor seasons from their perspective. So I think there may be a bit of an overhang there. New Zealand don't really have much apart from Chris Wood, really as a team. And as you say, I think Belgium have got quite lucky with this draw that there is a declining Belgium team, but they surely have enough to sort of usurp some of the other teams in this group. So fairly clear order for me. Egypt might just have enough to come third by beating New Zealand as well. So that's another accord by you and me for this one. Group H, it may well be another agreement here. I think this is a fairly vanilla group across the four of them. So for me, it's quite clear: Spain, Uruguay, Saudi, and Cape Verde.
Yeah,
With
exactly the
this, and
same.
you're probably in agreement.
Yeah, and we'll probably touch on Spain as we move through deeper into the
Yeah,
the structure of this podcast. So yeah, I mean, you'll be very surprised if Spain and Uruguay can't get out of that group. Can Saudi
agree.
Arabia and Cape Verde get enough points or goals to get the third place for playoff, whatever it's called? Probably not, to be honest, unless one of them scores a lot against the other and gets 3 points, potentially. Then moving to Group I, really tasty group.
Very tasty group. So I think for me, this is my favourite group of the whole tournament. And you look at, unfortunately, Iraq are in a sort of hard position here. But you look at those three teams, all three of them, if with sort of good sailing, could easily make the quarters as well. You look at the firepower of Norway, which we touched on in the last episode. Both have an outsider view with Senegal as well, who are arguably again the AFCON nations winners, and then you've got France, who are possibly the favourites going into this tournament as well, with the best attack I can think of in a long time. So I actually think this will be, despite me thinking Norway will do very well, I think Norway will come third in this group just because of the strength of France and Senegal. I think Senegal may nullify France in the first game, but then they'll get the wind in the sails after a thrashing of Iran and then beat Norway. But I am fairly interested to see how some of the big names do in this group. So Haaland could quite easily score two or three in his opening game, get on the run. Same with Mbappe if he does the same against Iraq. So I think this one is debatable, but France is just such an outstanding team. Almost put them in any group, and they'd probably be favourites to top that group.
Yeah, but could there be a repeat of, was it 0-2 when France didn't qualify at the hands of Senegal as well, if I remember rightly?
It was. Yeah, it was. Papa
Yeah.
Bouba Diop. Yeah, was the bogeyman in that game, and I don't think they even scored a goal in that tournament. Actually, that's how
So
bad it
again,
was.
and they would have gone into that as favourites.
Yeah,
They were Euro champions, the likes of Henri Zidane. Could we see a repeat of that? I mean, it's a tricky group. If they're caught off guard, and Norway and Senegal are up for it, you'd probably think that they've got enough to at least come third. And obviously, the frustrating thing I think about this year is, most teams are going to actually make it through to the
yeah. There's no
knockouts.
jeopardy. Yeah,
Yeah, so even if a big team was to perform poorly in the group stage, they're still luckily getting through with the third place. So, and that's the only downer on I think the group stage. But yeah, really interesting ties there. I think I'm, I'm- of course, you look at Haaland, you look at Odegaard, and think, wow, okay, that as a power force in attack surely will get them deep. But that you need a lot more than that. Um, it's hard to call that one for me. I did actually put Norway second and Senegal third, but it could quite easily be the other way around. And potentially, if one of them gets a result against France, you could see France maybe coming in second and third, and then that could, of course, impact um, various routes to the final. I know everyone's sort of trying to determine who their team will face next in the knockouts, but it's not always as clear as we think.
I agree, agree. And then on to Group J, which the only sad thing about Group J is the fact that Australia aren't in it over Jordan. Then it would be four double A teams through and through: Argentina, Austria, and Algeria. So that would have been a nice quirk. But I think this one, again, it is a sort of is a bit of a gimme for Argentina. That the challenge for them is the injuries as they go into the tournament. So Martinez with his hand and fingers. Obviously, Messi is not fully fit going into it, and probably Julian Alvarez, their star player, possibly going into this World Cup, but didn't play any of the recent friendlies. He's a doubt too. So
Mm.
that is really the challenge. Will they bring in? Would they risk a Nico Paz, who had a very good season under Fabregas at Como? They have got a very solid midfield, as we know. The Enzo, DePaul, and McAllister that will probably continue into this World Cup as well. So I think Argentina, nice easy run. They'll probably get 2 wins and a draw from this group, and maybe a few minutes for Messi before they go into the latter stages. How about you?
Yeah, I think what we'll see is quite a lot of the sort of the big nations or the favorites having mediocre group stages, just getting through, not looking particularly strong. I mean, Argentina, when they did win the World Cup, they didn't perform that great in the group stages, did they? Um, so, I could see something similar like that happening to Argentina and some of the other big nations. But not really exciting, really. You look at Austria, yeah, they've um again, sort of they have a history of just getting through, but then as soon as they play a decent team in the knockouts, they're out. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't really comment on Jordan. I'm not sure what much of a threat they can offer. So swiftly moving on to Group K, which has got one of your favourites in there, Portugal.
It has. I like this group actually, and I think Colombia are another good side too. I think Colombia and Ecuador are my kind of dark horses for South America. Luis Diaz on huge form. James is a proven World Cup player. On top of that, too, they look like a very good team just throughout the whole roster. Really, Portugal for me will go far, as we'll explore later in this tournament. And both Colombia and Portugal have got the two easier games to begin with. So I actually see both of them having 6 points going into that decider, of which Portugal will either, I think Portugal will get through on either goal difference or a narrow win. I can't really see both Congo and Uzbekistan doing enough to even get the third place. Really, as you've got people like Vissa, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. You've got the kind of Premier League pedigree in Congo. There's some half decent players there. Uzbekistan. I mean, this is wonderful for Central Asia with them qualifying, and I am very happy that they're there. Kushanov is their standout player, the best Central Asian player of all time, ostensibly. But I think they'll just be making up the numbers, much to the chagrin of any listeners from that region.
And of course, Fabio Cannavaro, can he a World Cup winning captain? Can he lead a mediocre Uzbekistan through? I mean, if they get out the groups, then fair play to them. That would be a big achievement. But yeah, I don't see it. But and to be fair, that Uzbekistan Congo game, I'm not sure when it lands. So that could be quite a good watch. Because they'll be both battling out for third place most likely.
Yeah,
Which finally gets us into the final group, um, which of course
a big one.
is a big one for us. England, Croatia, Ghana, and Panama. And I remember when the ties were made. It is a pretty tricky group. It could be difficult, and I do expect, similar to Argentina, we're not necessarily going to win all the games. I think there's going to be a few flat performances, maybe just winning 1-0 sort of thing. We're obviously up against Croatia first, and that's never an easy tie in the World Cup. Though, granted, Croatia probably again an aging side, not as strong as previously, but they'll always put up a good performance. Um, so I could quite easily see that being a draw, and then it's a case of making sure
Mm,
you get over Ghana, because that's a tricky tie
yeah.
as well. And you know if you go into that one off the back of a draw with Croatia, there's a lot of pressure on that game. Your fancy obviously as against Panama in the final game, but really, you're probably hoping that you reach the Panama game with 2 wins, because then, of course, maybe you can rest a few of the players. But I don't think we'll
Yeah.
have that luxury, unfortunately. Whereas, Argentina and some of the other big favorites, they probably can afford to sort of rest players more in the group stage.
Yeah, I concur. And on paper, it's a very hard group. You look at Croatia, finalists in 2018, third place in 2022. So on paper, they've really got the creds. Ghana are a very strong African team as well. So I think Ghana were top seeds of the third sort of seed for the draw. So in theory, the hardest third place team you could get in a group. Panama have good memories of Harry Kane's hat trick and John Stones' brace during a very hot day in 2018. So Panama won't be a threat at all. I am a bit anxious about the initial two games, and I don't think we'll win both of them at all. I think I could see a very dull performance, a bit like when we played at the US in 2022. I could see a sort of 0-0, 1-1 in those. But for me, England will have enough, Croatia will have enough, and then it remains to be seen if Ghana get enough points to qualify. So that's a real summary of the knockout of the group phases. So we're very happy to move on to the knockout phases. And what we'll do here, Ryan and I have clearly got different pathways as well for it, given the slight deviations in the group phase. So we'll have a little discussion, debate about how we think this will line up and work our way through the knockout phases. So very excited to do this and see where we do clash.
Indeed, and if
Right.
anyone
So
wants to follow along, we've actually done this on the bracket challenge, the FIFA bracket challenge it's called. So what you can do is input who you think's going to top the groups and come second, etc. And then it just works out who they're going to face all the way to the final. Um, though that's probably self-explanatory. I probably didn't need to explain that how a route to the
nice.
final chart works, but that's what we're going off. Um,
Agree. So, in terms of mine, Brian, and you'll have to go through too. So, my first knockout game I've got here, I have Germany against Paraguay. Yours might be a little bit different with a change of winner,
yeah,
but I've got Germany
mine's
Paraguay,
Ecuador. Yeah,
Ecuador Paraguay for your
yeah,
one. Have you
yeah.
got? And I've got Germany going through that one. Have you got Ecuador for you?
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So the winner of Group E we've got going through against Paraguay, who we see as, we saw them yesterday. They're a very eminently beatable team. So I think that's a fairly favourable knockout draw. My next game, I have France against Sweden for
As do
mine,
I.
of which, so I think I'd be surprised if we don't agree here that despite the firepower of Sweden, going to the original point, Sweden sort of beat all the teams that they're better than, but lose to all of the better teams in them. I see France winning this one.
Yeah, agreed. But for me, France will get quite deep in the tournament. Um, Moving on, then we've got Korea. I've got Korea against Canada and Netherlands against Scotland as the next two.
Yeah, I've got Korea, Canada. For me, the host will go out of this one. I think that they're a sort of wily old team, Korea, and they've got history of going deep in tournaments as well. They've got Premier League experience. Like Korea through that one. I've actually got a really interesting clash of Netherlands against Morocco, and there's
Mm,
quite a rivalry there. There's a big, obviously, North African Moroccan community in Netherlands. There's a lot of cross. Hakim Ziyech, for example, was born in the Netherlands, a star player of Morocco. So I think that will be a fascinating game. But Netherlands for me will go through that one. How about your ties, Ryan?
yeah, so I've got Korea, Netherlands, and equally, I think Netherlands will have enough to go through, which then gets them into a quarterfinal, which would be the same on your side, France against Netherlands, which could be quite a juicy quarterfinal.
Yeah, it will be. It will be there. So I think I've got ahead of that. It'll be fascinating because mine would be Germany, France going into that
Right.
quarter
Yeah.
final for I think guess yours is Ecuador, isn't it,
Yeah.
for that kind of bracket really? But yeah, I've got Germany to go out to France and then France against Netherlands, which will be that'll be some game. I mean, how far do you want to go to the quarters? Shall we carry on through here, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
yeah. Let's move through some of the other ties. So, moving on, I've got Colombia, Croatia, Spain,
Yep.
Austria.
So I've got exactly the same. And I've got Colombia to go through, actually. I fancy Colombia as a sort of I think they've got a form team, Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
Even Arias did very well on the recent sort of the attacking midfield did very well in the recent friendly game, and then Spain against Austria is fairly self-explanatory for any viewer, for me anyway.
Yeah, agreed. So for me, Colombia fall unfortunately to Spain. Um,
Yeah, same.
and then obviously Spain gets through to the quarters. USA, Algeria have got next, and then Belgium, Czech Republic.
Yeah, I've got Turkey, Algeria. So I think either Turkey or USA we'd fancy above Algeria for that, and Belgium I'd fancy against the Czechs. And I've actually got Turkey going through against Belgium. That'd be a little upset
Okay,
there for the tournament. So I've got Spain quarter against Turkey for this one.
okay. Well,
How about you? How about yours?
that's where we differ slightly. I've got Spain against Belgium to do the quarterfinals, but it's a good point you make. And like I said, you've got it's nice to predict a few upsets. It's never always all the six big nations or
Exactly.
favorites that they get through. So you've got to make a few shouts. So that's quite a nice one. And then moving down, Brazil, Japan, and Germany, Norway for me. And I think on both accounts, interesting games. Like we've already touched on Japan, but I
Mm.
do think Brazil will have enough firepower to get through. And then Germany, Norway. I know yours will probably be Ecuador, Norway. Is that right?
Senegal, I've got
Oh,
for
Senegal,
that. So,
Senegal. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're really tricky games. That who have you got actually for your one there? Because it's a pretty close encounter, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean Germany, Norway, that could be very interesting. I've actually got Norway to get through the Germans there, which again would be an upset. Um, but touching on what we mentioned about Germany, I don't think they're as strong an outfit as previous tournaments. And Norway, they're on a trajectory, aren't they? They've probably got the best team of all time potentially. Or
Yeah.
certainly in recent memory. So that could be quite interesting.
Have you got Brazil to beat Norway or Norway to do the unthinkable and
Yeah, I
take them
think
out?
I think it will start there. I think to predict that Norway knock out Germany and Brazil, that's
Yeah,
what's the odds on that?
yeah, yeah,
Great if they can, but
yeah.
no, I don't see it.
Yeah,
And then
I mean,
finally,
I've got just on mine, I've got Senegal against Ecuador for that, which I think is actually a really hard last 32 game. I feel sorry for both of them there. I think Senegal will make it through, but then Brazil just got too much. So Brazil, I think we're both in agreement for a quarter
yeah,
place. My side, the draw, I've actually got Mexico, Scotland there in the Mexico Azteca Stadium, of which Mexico would go through. And mine's actually England, Norway, which is a really tricky game for England
mm,
for all the aforementioned reasons you said. Haaland against the country he was born in,
mm,
for example. I do think England have got enough to get through, and then a juicy tie playing in the Azteca against the hosts as well. Which any sort of fans that look back to the folklore remember the 1970 tournament that was played there, and the great game between England and Brazil, the worst game between England and West Germany when we're 2-0 up, took off our star players, Bobby Charlton amongst others, and lost 3-2 after extra time. So can we get a bit of recompense here? Even the '86 World Cup, that was the hand of God and the Maradona ghost and the Maradona great goal as well. So can we get a
mm.
bit of back in the pocket? I think we can. So I think England Brazil for my quarter final here.
I've got the same result, a different pathway, obviously with the teams, but again, England to play Mexico in that round of 16, and it's a difficult tie. It's particularly with it being in Mexico as well. You can imagine Harry blowing out his arse in centre forward. Um, but I mean, in the round of 32, the way mine's landed is Mexico, Morocco in the round of 32. And if that is the
Yeah.
tie,
Mm,
Morocco could quite easily come over
mm,
that one. Then it's England, Morocco, which also is a
mm.
very difficult game for England. You had England playing Norway. I've got them playing Senegal, which is not an easy tie either.
Mm.
So, if we do top the group, it's a tricky route all the way to the final for England. Um, and they could face Argentina, which leads us on to the bottom of the draw. So I've got Argentina to beat Uruguay, which would be an epic
Same.
round of 32, and Turkey to come through against Iran.
And mine's more exciting. So I've got the biggest geopolitical drama. I've got USA against Iran to play one another. If they both
Oh
come
my God.
second, they'll do. So I think a dodgy decision. I reckon that'll be 1-1. A dodgy last minute penalty to America will knock out Iran, and then I dread to think what will happen from
That
there. But
that
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 will be
would be
something.
that would make history. The first time two countries at war play each other in a live World Cup knockout round. Oh God.
So let's keep it, viewers. Let's keep our fingers crossed. If Iran comes second, if America comes second, they're guaranteed to play each other in the knockout. So that will be something. I'll be definitely Friday the 3rd of July, Dallas Stadium. Watch out for it. And then, regardless of the winner there, I think Argentina have got enough to beat whomever they play, even if it is America.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
I guess you'd be in agreement with that.
Yeah, yeah. And then finally, the way it lands for me is Switzerland, Egypt, and Portugal, Ivory Coast. I've got Switzerland to come
Same.
through. You'd expect them to, well, not necessarily, but again, like we said and touched on, when they come up against a team of similar standing, usually they find a way of getting through. And Portugal to beat Ivory Coast, with Portugal to then beat Switzerland to get to a quarterfinal of Argentina against Portugal.
I've got exactly the same, and eagle-eyed fans will recall that that's actually the same round of 16 game as the last World Cup when Carlo Ramos scored a hat trick, and then it was 6-1 win to Portugal against Switzerland. So I think it picks up the same outcome, maybe not as heavy win, but I think Portugal to go through and set up that game of goat versus goat on the 11th of July that we're all waiting for. So just to recap, then we've got at the bottom of the draw Argentina to play Portugal. Wow, we've got Brazil to play England. And then the day before, I've got Spain against Turkey. And your path is slightly different, Ryan.
Yeah, mine would be Spain against Belgium.
And then the one above, I've got, and you have got as well, France against Netherlands here. So this is a very, very tasty set of fixtures. I mean, for me, Turkey, the only sort of non-big
Mm.
nation there, or not, let's say non-World Cup finalist to be in my last 8 there. And it looks, even Belgium would be your only non-World Cup finalist too, actually. So we've
Yeah,
got 7 stellar nations at least, right?
I'm sort of disappointed in myself that I haven't got like a, a dark horse reaching the quarterfinals because it sort of goes against what I've been saying. But again, this is always hard because if they come second rather than first, it changes the whole order of things. Like it wouldn't surprise me if a Norway and Ecuador, a Turkey, as you mentioned, sort of reached the quarters. It's just the way that mine's landed, and I have been actually saying Belgium aren't that strong, but just the way it's landed, they beat America for me. They beat Czech Republic, and just so happens that they get to a quarterfinal here. But I do
Yeah.
fancy Spain to, if it does happen, Spain to beat Belgium, and you're probably the same, Spain to beat
Uh,
Turkey.
Spain to so yeah, I think the dream will end for Turkey. I can't see them shadow. Well, a quarters would be a very respectable result, but I can't see them eclipsing the 2002 team of sort of Rostu, Hakan Suka, Emre, those sort of players. So I think that would be a great performance for Turkey. My upset, really, my big upset is Netherlands to beat France, which
Wow,
would be a
there we go.
controversial opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that it is the archetypal attack versus defence. And the Netherlands do have very good results in World Cup quarterfinals. You look at when they knocked out Brazil in South Africa when no one fancied them and they're 1-0 down. Wesley Sneijder masterclass, helped by Felipe Melo in that game, put them through. That I just fancy, and even you look at the last World Cup, they were 2-0 down against Argentina. Arguably, Argentina are getting all the decisions, some of the conspiracy
hmm
theorists would say. And then they came back in the last couple of minutes and were clearly unlucky to go out on penalties. I think they're a solid team. I think they know their system, they play their system, they can nab a goal and then hold on. And I think we discussed it previously, but there is a disharmony and discord a little bit in the French ranks, which I think who is the main man, Dembele, Mbappe, does Elise want to be there? Then you've got Cherky kneeling before or whatever it's crouching has gone viral. I just think there's that disharmony. Would Tuchemeni knock someone out during the build up? You don't know what's going to happen with them. So I fancy the Dutch um, to go through in that one. I'm sure yours would be sort of the more standard prediction, and France
Well,
to set up.
you say that, and France aren't one of my favorites, and I will come to obviously who we think will win. I can certainly see a scenario where France underperform in the tournament. Like I said, I could see a scenario where they finish third in their group, which would then obviously alter the route to the final. Um, but just the way it's landed for me, and I made comment in episode one that yes, star quality in the Netherlands team defensively. Did they lack a bit going forward in firepower? Who's going to be the star of that team that sort of gets them across the line against France? Despite the fact that I feel that it is a slightly weaker, not necessarily in star quality, but just the harmony of the group in the France unit as previous tournaments. Didier Deschamps is just an absolute savage in tournaments, and he gets the best out of his players, and he won't stand for any disharmony, and he's prepared to drop a big name. So I've got France to come on top there, but it certainly it would be a classic, I can imagine, which would
And
then,
on this side of the draw, shall we go through? So
yeah,
I've got Spain versus Netherlands. I mean, for me, after beating France, I can't see Netherlands doing both, and beating Spain, probably the two favourites. So I think Spain, we actually, interestingly enough, haven't really touched on so much, just because they're such a well-oiled machine, and they have great players in every position, and technically I think their possession type football would drain other teams here. I think they'll just hold on to the ball in midfield, won't waste too much energy. Essentially, to use a non-technical term, knacker out their opponents in 30 degrees heat while they're retaining the ball, and just be enough. So I think Spain for me will have enough to beat Netherlands and make it to the World Cup final. How about you, Ryan?
yeah. For me, the team that has so long as they finish top of the group, Spain have the easiest route to the final. And if I was to put money on a team reaching the final, not winning it, but reaching the final, Spain for me would be my favorite.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and we touched on it before. They do have strength in depth. They have like for like substitutions in many positions, and I think that's going to be a big important part of this tournament, particularly as we go deeper into the semi-finals, finals. Um, my tie is France against Spain again. Could be a classic. Um, but I've gone for Spain to actually reach the final, as mentioned. So that's that side of the draw. It seems like the two of us have both said Spain to get there.
Yeah.
Whether it's at the hands of France or the Netherlands in the semi-final, that remains to be seen. Could
I
a
mean,
you
and
know
the bot. Sorry, go on.
could like you said before, could on that side of the draw, could an Ecuador or a Colombia cause havoc potentially?
Yeah, I agree, and it's very tasty, and that would actually be a repeat of the semi-final in the Euros as well, when Spain sort of beat France. So I'm excited for that. And I mean, the second half of the draw, wow, it reminds me of back in, talking of memories, back in World Cup 2006, the bottom half of the draw,
Yeah,
it was England versus Portugal on the same day, France against Brazil. And I remember being very upset, almost just watching the France Brazil game from afar, because we'd obviously got knocked out earlier on. And I wish I'd just sat there glued to the TV, because that really was some game. And it almost gives me the same goosebumps looking at England, Brazil, Portugal against Argentina. I can't wait for them. I'll actually do the easier thing and let you kick off with your predictions, so I can listen and copy them if I agree. So you go
yeah.
for it,
So
Ryan.
yeah, so I've got the same quarterfinal, and wow, both those fixtures are fantastic. I think for England, Brazil, um, arguably two of the most exciting teams. I think, and we due a win against Brazil in a knockout tournament, and I'm going to sit my neck out and say we'll do it over them in the quarterfinal. I just think we're slightly more balanced as a team, and we touched on this last week. I think despite having solid centre backs, Brazil's defensive setup as a team is probably not as strong. Um, you know, similar to France in a way that Vinicius and Rafinha, who is the star, whereas England, I think it's a lot clearer who is the main or who are the main players that we need to rely on. Certainly would be, a great game. And if we did get through against Brazil, the country will go absolutely wild. And then Argentina, Portugal.
So
Uh,
just on that as well, if I may. So my challenge to you would be in 35-degree heat. Our centre halves have proven to be fairly injured. So Stones is a quality operator, but has proven to, have an injury record.
mm,
Gay's going into the tournament with a knock. Reece James has had injury woes. O'Reilly's only had one good season behind him. So say Reece James gets taken off. O'Reilly can't make it through. We're playing, I don't know, Concert, Dan Burn, Livramento and another person. Do you really think that they can
and
stop the cutthroat of Vinny, Raf, Cunha,
I mean, there's
Neymar?
lots of if but some maybes there, Matt.
Even at full
But
strength, do you think that we can then? 'Cause I don't think we
no,
can
well,
even at full
at
strength.
full strength, and we're going to touch on the next episode specifically on England, so I'll reserve some of my thoughts there. But as a back four, because that was the question, yes, I do. Yes, I do think they can come up against a France, an Argentina, and be strong. I mean, Guy could probably walk into every single club side in the world apart from Arsenal. Um, and I think that's a fair assessment.
And PSG.
Yeah, maybe PSG,
Yeah.
but he'll play for Barcelona, he'll play for Real Madrid. So he's a solid centre back. He's at the peak of his career. Consa's just won the Europa League, had a solid season at Villa. If you want to put Stones in there instead, one of the most decorated centre backs in English football. Reece James, unfortunate in his career with injuries, but we know when he is fit and he's not injured, arguably he's one of the best right backs in the world, and potentially one of the best right backs in this tournament. I'd really only say, just thinking out loud, Hakimi's certainly above him just on credentials, but after that, no Timber in the tournament, unfortunately. It
Dumfries has had a good record for
Dumfries,
Dutch, but
yeah.
yeah, I take the point. Yeah, I take the point.
And then we've in the left back position, we've got arguably the most exciting young player of the tournament in O'Reilly. And the way I think Tuchel's going to set up, and we'll touch on this in the next episode, not to give too much away, is O'Reilly's one of the key figures in this team. Certainly when we're attacking. But I'll save that for our fans to tune into the next one.
We'll
But so
save
yeah.
that analysis then. So we're in disagreement on the big game. Obviously, we're both cheering on England. I don't think we've got enough. So I think Brazil will go through. You think England will go through, and then to the other big tie, I think if I kick off on that, we may be in disagreement again. I think
Mm,
this is probably the glamour tie. This will be when you're talking to when anyone's talking to their kids, their grandkids about the World Cup in the future, they'll be, do you remember watching the game between Ronaldo and Messi, the 2026 World Cup? It was their last World Cup, last game against one another. It's one of those great memories that could be captured forever in World Cup folklore. I'm so excited for it. Even taking the Ronaldo Messi debate out of the team, if you compare the teams, and I think you will agree with me on this, I hope, if you did man for man on the teams, Portugal are just so much better. That midfield three
mm.
is the best in the tournament for me. Vitinha, João Neves, and Bruno Fernandes. You've got a solid defence. Nuno Mendes is the best left back in the world, in my opinion. Ruben Diaz is equivalent of John Stones, but better in terms of credentials. There, you've got other solid options as well that can do well. Bernardo Silva's just gone to Real Madrid, arguably one of the two or three standout Premier League players as well this year. I think they've got enough to do it. And will Messi be fully fit? Are they too reliant on him? They're an aging Argentina team, as we discussed last time. So personally, for me, I've got Portugal against Brazil in the semi.
Yeah, I mean, when I did this a few days ago, I've actually got Argentina to come through that tie, but I can't, of course, see Portugal doing the same. And I think you're right. If you did actually list the players play for man on paper, Portugal would come out on top. I think the reason why I've got them to fall at the quarterfinals is more of a hatred of Portugal in terms of what they've done to England in the past, but also just to go against you and your little United sort of hat on. So, but yeah, the Messi Ronaldo thing might actually take second fiddle to the game. I think going into the game, everyone will be talking about Ronaldo Messi, but actually the two might not have an influence on the game. It could be, like you say, the midfields up against each other, which, um, you know, thinking out loud could be a really appetizing tie. I've got Argentina,
Yeah.
despite the fact that you could argue, it's an older dog, slightly injured, but
Mm.
still they are the champions, and you've got to give them that. Um, so I've actually got opposite to you, an England Argentina semi final, and you've got a Portugal and Brazil semi final,
They're
which either way,
mouth-watering.
absolutely great.
Absolutely mouth-watering. I mean, yeah, my one, I think, again, Portugal, for all the reasons you don't fancy Brazil, I think they've got too much for England, but I think Portugal have got too much for them in this knockout phase. I think the crux of it really is when you're a kid, do you remember you'd look at it and think, wow, the South American teams are incredible. They'd even bring, in 2002, they brought Kaká as a reserve. No one had heard of him. And then look what he became. Same with R9 in 94 when they barely played at all. That was the strength and depth of a Brazilian roster that just had absolute gems everywhere. You look at it now, and I know Argentina won the last World Cup, but they don't have the same depth that they did back when we were almost scared of them. And I don't think Portugal will be scared, or England will be scared of these South American teams. So I think Portugal have 3 Champions League winners, or 4 if you include Goncalo Ramos, actually 4 Champions League winners in the best team of the last 5-6 years or so. They've got arguably the best Premier League player in Bruno Fernandes. They've got arguably the best player of all time, sprinkled with other great gems as well. So for me, the whole Neymar thing is a bit of a sideshow, and I'm surprised Carlo's taken him as well. But let's see. I think Portugal will get through there. So I've got a Spain, Portugal, Iberian Peninsula final in my mind. So it'd be very, very fascinating. How about you?
I mean, if it was a Portugal-Spain final, I'd be very disappointed. I mean, it's it's sort of two nations that I wouldn't necessarily want to see in the final, given past wins over England. Um, yeah, I've got as I mentioned, Spain I think have the easiest route to the final, and if I was to put money on someone reaching the final, I've got Spain. But then I do think whoever they come up against, whether it is in your case Portugal, whether it is in my case England, or even if Brazil beat England and got to the final, I fancy one of those against Spain in the final. So my prediction is, as it is on the route now, England. But equally, if Brazil get over England, I've got Brazil to get to the final instead, at the mercy of Portugal in semis, or
Hmm.
Argentina if they get through. But lots of if buts
So
and maybes there.
you think England have got enough to take out the holders in the semis?
So that's the only thing about my route to the final for England is if they do go on to win it, they would have to beat Brazil, then
Hmm.
they'd have to beat either Argentina or Portugal, and then they'll have to beat Spain, who recently beat us in the Euro final by a. I mean, it wasn't a far margin in terms of scoreline, but
Hmm.
they were clearly the better team in that game. The only difference, well, there's a few differences, and I don't want to touch on it too much because that's going to be reserved for the next episode. Is I think it's Tuchel himself and in-game management, and I think that's going to get us through some of these ties. We know we've got the quality. I'll break down why I think we've got the quality in the next episode. Um, and you've got a dream in life, Matt. We've not won it since '66, and we've been in finals now across the last 8 years, semi-finals in World Cups.
Hmm.
This team has peaked at the right time. We've got the best striker in the world. I'm going to make the case that we've got the strongest midfield three in the world as well. We've got a keeper that performs very well in an England top, and some young players as well that are going to make a difference. So we'll break that down in the next episode. But in the purposes of this, it sounds like we're both convinced that Spain are going to make the final, and then it's a case of an England or a Portugal.
It is. And then in the final, it feels like you're going all in on England then. You're rolling the
Yeah,
dice and
I'm rolling
going
it.
for
I'm
us.
rolling it. I think if it was a Spain-England final, we lost them in the Euros. We'll have even more motivation to beat them again in the finals and actually win the creme de la creme in the World Cup.
World Cup final, 19th of July, Portugal, Spain. Portugal to do the unthinkable, CR7 to loft the trophy in front of the American fans, complete his career. Messi 22, Ronaldo 26. GOAT discussion ended. CR7 World Cup winner. You heard it here first.
On that
Done.
bombshell, ladies and gents, we'll wrap up the episode. We're going to record another one in the coming days ahead of England's first game, where we're really going to break down the strength and weaknesses in Matt's view of the England side. And I'm going to make the point that this is the tournament where we finally get over the line and win the World Cup.
Let's see. Let's see with that. Thank you very much, as always, for all of your views. Please like and subscribe. We're on Spotify, Best of Rivals podcast. We're also on YouTube. We've got a number of shorts as well. So type in Best of Rivals. You'll find the two Best of Rivals, Matt and Ryan, hosting this pod. So we very much look forward to seeing you again for the England one. That'll be out in the next couple of days. Thank you again. See you soon.